Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Armchair Booking Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Stunning Steve Barber, and joining me, as always, is my absolutely awesome co-host, the intellectual rock star himself, Delicious Dwaylen Davis.
Hey, everybody.
And I don't know about you, Dwaylen, but I'm tired.
I'm very tired.
Yep, because we are trying
Yeah.
something a little bit new right now.
Yeah.
Because we recognize that due to our shifting schedules over the past couple of months,
hmm
we just were not available in the evening time as we usually are.
Yeah.
So we're trying out in the morning,
Yeah.
and right now it is, well, just a little bit after 6 in the morning, Dwaylen's time.
Yeah.
In
And
fact, if you're watching on YouTube, you can actually see the time right behind. Well, it was right there until Dwaylen pulled his arm up. But you can actually see the
right there.
time. Yeah, right there. Right behind him, so you can actually see the time. And because we don't want to miss out on giving our listeners shows, because when we miss, believe me, I get messages. Dwaylen, do you get messages?
Yes.
Ask, yeah,
Yep. Sure
yeah,
do.
yeah. So we apologize for that, but we're trying to make sure
Yeah.
that we are able to get this going. We don't want it to stop. So,
Right. No.
oh, and we've actually had a topic for a couple days. So, and it kind of, in a way, it almost a continuation of our last episode when we were talking about Roman Reigns, but we kind of mentioned the face of the WWE and then
yeah.
really the face of wrestling. So it then kind of occurred to us, who actually is the face of wrestling, not just
Mm.
WWE, but just wrestling in general.
Yeah.
And it's led to some interesting conversations, and I know this will be something that'll be up for debate, and frankly, we welcome it.
Right.
Yeah, because we like those kind of conversations, those kind of conversations that are actually productive and thought provoking, and um, so I got to looking at the rosters, and I was like, wow, there's a couple other things that I kind of noticed also about the roster when comparing ring names and real names. By the way, there was just some observations. I was like, huh, but excuse me. But before we get started, I want to go ahead and give our contact and listening info. If you want to email the show, it's armchairbookingpodcast at gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. Just look up Armchair Booking Wrestling Podcast. On Twitter, it's at Booking Armchair. And on TikTok, it's, of course, at Armchair Booking. And, of course, on YouTube, we're already there. You can find us our merch site, tpublic.com/user/armchair-booking-podcast. You can also find Dwaylen, his podcast, The Intellectual Rockstar, which, by the way, I've been missing hearing that, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to get back to that too. Just the food truck has been crazy here lately. And it's like by the time I get done with the food truck and get home, it's like I'm just exhausted. It's like I'm so tired.
I personally think that your next episode should be about Captain America, and I'm not just saying that because that's what you're wearing on your chest right now.
yeah.
But so there's the inspiration for that. But if you have not listened to the Intellectual Rockstar podcast, go check it out on any audio platform you can think of. He does not have merch yet, but I think he ought to get some merch soon, because I would buy it. That's just me. But you can also check out my other podcast, my non-wrestling, called the Cubicle Chat, where we talk about anything, basically the kind of conversations you would have like in a cubicle, sitting in an office environment, or on your front porch, or by a campfire, or just talking, just in general.
Mhm.
We cover just about every topic you can think of. So, and I want to give other shout outs to, first, we always got to shout out Ted the Hillbilly Hill, because Ted's always been good to us. He is the
Yep.
Podfather. Go check out the Hill Truth if you haven't yet. Definitely go check him out, because Ted's just awesome. We're in negotiations to appear on his show right now as well, and it's such an honor, because I mean, he's still trending number one on MySpace and in
And
Antarctica.
Antarctica.
I
Yep.
mean, award winning, just awesome podcast. I also want to shout out BC Hunter from Wrestling with the Truth.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, he's become a pretty good friend of ours, and we've been, you know, uh, we've been corresponding with him back and forth. Same thing, we hope to appear in his show or have him appear in ours again, because we've always had great times anytime we've been able to collaborate like that. Uh, Also, Finisher Wrestling. same thing. We've been
Yeah, we've been trying to get back
our
with him, and yeah,
yeah, schedules just we thought we had something and then boom, it would fall through. But
yeah,
we're trying because those guys are great when we had them on, and so uh they've been trying to get us on theirs as well, and we know it'll be a good time. It's just a matter of getting the timing correct.
yeah.
Um, Also the Wrestling Society Network. We kind of
Hmm.
forget about them sometimes, even though we really shouldn't, because we had Bear on our podcast not too long ago,
Yeah.
and he's invited us to be on theirs, and
Hmm.
hopefully that'll be soon, maybe real soon, actually. But we're trying to get all these things scheduled. Want to also give another shout out to Justin from the TNC Sports Talk. He was able to get that back up and running. He had his first show yesterday in quite a while, and
Okay.
yep. So and he gave us a shout out, and he actually played not just our promo but our video promo because
Oh,
he's
okay. Cool.
yes, so he's live on YouTube. So
Hmm.
if you're on YouTube and you saw the intro at the beginning, the one that has all the pictures of me and Joel, and especially the one from when we were in the chess club, because yeah, we are nerded like that. Justin actually played that intro, so
Cool.
I definitely appreciate that. And I also cannot forget about the Dad World Order. Some other great guys that
Yeah.
they've been on our podcast, and I know we've talked about going on theirs. I might see them here soon at Summer Sizzler. The
Oh,
big,
okay. Yeah.
yeah, the big Northern Wrestling Federation. There's big show. Their big summer show. There we go. If I can learn how to talk. All right. So when we talk about the face of wrestling, I know when we were kids, if you had to ask us right about 1984, because 84 is when I started watching wrestling,
Hmm.
who would you have said, would have been the face of wrestling around 1984?
Probably Hogan. I
Yep.
mean, that's when Hulkamania was, you know,
Running wild, brother.
yeah, running really wild. And yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be Hogan. I mean, if you asked back then, if you asked any wrestling fan, if you asked any non-wrestling fan, can you name me a professional wrestler? Hogan's going to be the one that they would name.
Yep. Because he was just at the time he was made bigger in life. I think probably secondary would be Andre. And just
Yes.
because Andre, I mean, a lot of
Hmm.
people just knew, oh, Andre the Giant, because Andre was
Hmm.
also in, he had a couple of bit parts in TV shows, um, and also he was part of that super card where it was like the boxers against wrestlers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so people knew who Andre was, and they just knew Andre was Andre.
Yeah.
Um, but Hogan was all over the place.
Yeah. Hogan was just a phenomenon then. It's like he, you know, took over the wrestling world, took over the entertainment world. And as much as I ugh, hate to say it, uh, The Rock wouldn't have been able to expand beyond wrestling like he did if Hogan hadn't laid that groundwork back in 84, 85. Because Hogan was, what The Rock has done with his career, Hogan did back then.
And Hogan was nowhere near as successful as The Rock, or now he just goes by just his real name, Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he will always be The Rock to me.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But yeah, Hogan was nowhere near successful, but he was able to break out of that bubble of just being a pro wrestler, and he was a pop culture icon.
Yeah, they had their own cartoon, and there were other characters on the cartoon,
Yeah.
but Hogan was still the focal point.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, if you would have, like you said, if you would have asked anybody, a non wrestling fan back then, for the most part, and I do know certain areas of the country, um, if
Yeah.
you say name a wrestler, they'll probably name someone who was more local.
Yeah.
Um, but even though they may have known who Hogan was, but if you go down to Dallas and name a wrestler, they'll say any of the Von Erichs.
Yeah. Yep.
You go up to like Minneapolis, and it'd probably be somebody from the AWA, maybe. I don't
Hmm.
know. I mean, the AWA was never as big as the WWF or the NWA.
No. unfortunately, but no, it
Yeah.
never was.
You go up to like Calgary and be one of the Hearts.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and of course you go down to around Charlotte, and more than likely it'd be Ric Flair.
Yeah.
Um, but that's not to say that people still wouldn't say Hogan, especially if they had satellite
Yeah.
TV and they were able to
Because
what and or USA Network and
yeah, because just at that time, Hogan was everywhere. He was what he was wrestling. He was what people thought of when they thought of pro wrestling. Now, wrestling fans, if you ask a wrestling fan back then who was the face of wrestling, a lot of fans are going to say Ric Flair
yep.
because, you know, Flair was the one that was wrestling, traveling all over the country, really all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
defending his world championship, wrestling top talent. And, Flair was on TV every week when when Hogan wasn't. And Flair was wrestling on TV on a regular basis when Hogan wasn't. And but Flair hadn't got to that pop culture status. Flair's there now.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
But
Flair's there now. I mean, Flair has been in, you know, even just the woo has become a, you know, is firmly entrenched in pop culture. And like he's been in Bad Bunny songs doing the woo. He's been in rap videos with different artists. Just, Flair's become that pop culture icon. It
didn't
just
didn't
took
he have
him
a
a lot
song?
longer.
Didn't he have a song named after him, the Ric Flair Drip?
Yep. Hmm. Yep.
So I mean that.
And even the promo that he did where he's like talking about where he spent more money on spilt liquor than this other guy made in a year. That has that has blown up here in the last few years. Like a lot of like college football teams, when they're like before they leave the locker room, that's what they use to get themselves hyped up. And it's just, you know, it's pretty cool that he's gotten there. It just took him a lot longer just because non wrestling fans weren't as familiar with Ric Flair back then because he wasn't as he didn't have as much exposure as Hogan did at that time.
And that's a real shame considering Ric Flair definitely his promos were better because you couldn't copy and paste Ric Flair's promos over and over again. Hogan's
No,
promos, I mean, they were
yeah,
now don't get me wrong, his promos were exciting. Come on, brother, but
I mean his promos were great. The energy and just the conviction and like you
right,
you felt like he believed and meant everything he said, but they never made any sense.
right.
It's just he was just able to get past that. He didn't have to make a sensical promo because all he had to do was stand there and flex and you know yell a little bit, and he had that natural charisma that you know got him through. But Flair, I mean, your promo could be 2 minutes, but you got a good story with
Mm-hmm.
Flair, and Flair always sold whatever was going on.
Yep.
He always sold it well, whoever he was feuding with, and I always liked how Flair would always put over whoever he was feuding with. I mean, on the mic, he would be like, you know, like one of my favorite promos is where he says, he's standing there and he's not even wearing the suit or anything. He's just like wearing a t-shirt and everything. And he's holding the belt and he's like listing off like Nikita Koloff, Dusty Rhodes, Barry Windham, guys like that. He said, all of you want to be champion. And he points at the belt. He's like, but this lives at my house. All of you are great, but it's going to take a really great man to take it from me. And so he would always give his opponents their props, but then tell them, you're great, but you're just not good enough to beat me.
And you believed it. And like you said, wrestling fans and
Hmm.
like who actually kept up with not just the Mid Atlantic, not just World Class, not
Right.
just whatever was coming out of Memphis. You go down to Memphis, that's another one. Even now, you go down to Memphis, they
You
never
go to
wrestler
Memphis, it's
Jerry
Jerry
Lawler.
Lawler.
Yeah.
Yeah, it, I
Uh,
mean, without any hesitation, you go to Memphis and say, who's the face of wrestling? Jerry Lawler.
yeah,
That's what people are going to say that now, and Jerry Lawler ain't wrestled it forever.
right. Which Ric Flair should actually, take notice.
Yep.
Yeah. Because Flair was the greatest in the ring, arguably,
Yeah.
but he needs to keep his butt out of the ring now because I
Oh
don't want
yeah.
to see a 74-year-old man passing out in the ring twice
No.
like the way he did. But I mean, he's pushing other stuff and he's keeping himself in the spotlight because, well, that's also Ric Flair.
Yes. Yeah. It's kind of Flair. It's like I think the spotlight is like air for him now. It's like
Mm-hmm.
he's got to have it to live. So
And excuse me, and it's amazing, when Hogan became the face of wrestling, when Hulkamania started in January '84. Really, he was like the face of wrestling for a non-wrestling fan, but till '91
yeah,
ish.
yeah. Till he dropped. Really, he was probably the face of wrestling until he dropped the title to the Warrior at WrestleMania 6. And then that's kind of when things started to,
Yeah, that was 80. That was 90. Yeah,
yeah, that's,
1990.
and things started to kind of shift. Just in the wrestling landscape altogether, it's just, I think fans are getting a little wore out with, the Hulkamania shtick. And WWE was pushing the Warrior as Hogan's replacement because Hogan had other, you know, he had Hollywood commitments and things like that.
That's some really bad movies to make.
Oh God, they were awful. They were so bad. Um, and that's another difference between him and The Rock. I mean, The Rock's a good actor. People are like, "Well, he's the same guy and everything," and it's like he's him. I feel like The Rock is just himself, and that just
He
comes
ad libs a
through.
lot. He ad libs a lot of his stuff because Rock
Yeah,
actually he is a great ad libber,
yeah,
and The Rock or Dwayne Johnson, he's actually the
yeah,
highest paid performer in Hollywood right now.
yeah,
Hogan
yep.
never even came close to that.
God no. If Hogan was if you take how movies come out now, if you put it back then, Hogan's movies would go straight to the bargain bin or straight to video on demand. They're not going to the theater. He's not making $1 billion, you know, in ticket sales, and so. But I think Hogan. I think it started to kind of not really fade, but just people started wanting something different around the time he dropped the titles of the Warrior. WWE thought the Warrior was going to be that replacement, but that never ended up happening.
And as wrestling was evolving, I would say probably after he lost the title to Warrior, and he was still kind of, people say, oh, yeah, Hogan. You might throw Savage in there. People might know who Randy Savage is because of the Slim Jim commercials, but they know him for
Mm-hmm.
Slim Jim. They probably had not even watched him wrestle.
Mm-hmm.
But then a couple years after that, Stone Cold, became Stone
Mm-hmm.
Cold.
Yeah.
And
Who was who was Stunning Steve and
he wa-
everywhere
he
else? Which
really
there
was.
you
That's right. So,
go.
you know what? He decided to stop using it. He
So
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 fair
you got to
game.
pick it up. I mean,
Yeah. So, and if he ever wants to discuss it, well, come on the show and discuss it.
there you go.
I have
Yeah.
no issue with that. So,
Me neither. Not
you
at all.
know,
Anytime.
but really, Stone Cold kind of became the face because of the Austin 316 shirts.
Yep. And just, he was that, you know, he to me, he was like wrestling's first like real anti-hero. It's like,
Yeah.
you wanted to cheer him because he was fighting against the system, but he didn't care if you cheered him or not. He was just going to do whatever he wanted to do. And I mean, his tactics, that's that's the that's the true measure for me of somebody really getting over and going, because Austin was, when he first started being Stone Cold, he was a heel, and then the fans turned him face. His tactics have never changed. He did the same stuff as as a face that he did as a heel. It's just people got behind him because he was fighting against
It was
the
relatability.
yeah.
Um,
Everybody can relate to wanting to beat up their boss.
yep.
And they got to vicariously do that through Steve Austin beating up Vince McMahon on a weekly basis.
And that was actually something else I was thinking of when I was looking through like the list of um personnel. And here's something else when we talk about current ones. I might as well say it now because we talked about it before we started recording. We are very aware that most people out in the world know WWE. They don't know AEW, ROH, Impact, even New
Mm-hmm.
Japan, all those as well.
Right.
And so we're being realistic. We know that the face of wrestling is probably on the WWE roster.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, I mean, we look
Because
at,
I mean, it's still the biggest game in town. It's
yep,
still the largest wrestling company in the world. And it's hard not to focus on, talent from that company as being the face of wrestling because again, you ask a non-wrestling fan, name me a wrestling company, WWE is what they're going to say.
WWE. And, now you may have some exceptions also around like maybe Jacksonville, because that's
Yeah.
where AEW is headquartered.
Yeah.
Um, but, but we, also mentioned, you might say, well, Chris Jericho, John Moxley, but where did they get real big?
Exactly. They got, you know, Moxley was Dean Ambrose in WWE. Jericho, Jericho's, biggest, biggest success has still come in WWE. Um, and like I know some people will be like, "Oh, well, Kenny Omega's in AEW." Yeah, but Kenny Omega stateside is not the same as Kenny Omega in New Japan Pro Wrestling. In New Japan Pro Wrestling, Kenny Omega is a god. He is a
Yeah,
wrestling god. Um, but still, he does not eclipse Okada. If as far as New Japan goes, if you say who's the face of wrestling, but you could only pick from New Japan Pro Wrestling, it's Okada. He's just become that. He is New Japan Pro Wrestling, and but stateside, Kenny Omega. A lot of people know who Kenny Omega is based on his work from New Japan because a lot of his work in the States, especially earlier in his career, is not, you know, not readily accessible. Like when he
exactly.
wrestled for Pro Wrestling Gorilla, he did a few things in early days of Ring of Honor and stuff like that, but you can't see that like you can go to New Japan World and watch any Kenny Omega match he ever had in New Japan Pro Wrestling. So you can't really put him with Jericho and Moxley because he's just not as well known in the States by a non wrestling fan.
Right. And that's not a slight on him. I mean, because Kenny
No,
Omega
not at
is
all.
still
Not at
phenomenal.
all. He just spent the majority, he built a name for himself, overseas. So for those non wrestling fans over here, he's having to build a name for himself now.
And, if we're getting back to like almost like almost run a history lesson, like the big names, but 96 is when Stone Cold, that's when the Austin 316 happened. At the
Yep.
same time, almost, I mean, I don't know what the span of days was between that and Hogan turning heel and joining the NWO.
Yeah. Hogan turned at Bash at the Beach and Austin won King of the Ring. And they were the time frame was just like
They were right close to each
really
other.
close. Yeah. And what's funny is we may never have gotten Stone Cold, what he became if he hadn't have if the King of the Ring hadn't have been changed because he wasn't supposed to win it. Triple H was supposed to win King of the Ring that year, but because of the curtain call, Hall and Nash were gone, and Shawn Michaels at the time was the world champion. So Triple H was the one who got punished. So that him winning the King of the Ring was scrapped until the next year. Um, so then Austin got pushed, and all it took was him getting his mouth busted open during the semifinals, and then going to get stitches, coming back, winning the finals, and then cutting that promo, and they were off to the races.
Yeah. And it never occurred to me until you just said it. Hall and Nash were involved in curtain call, which indirectly led to Steve Austin winning King of the Ring.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep.
of course, they left, and then they formed the NWO along with Hogan, which was
Yeah.
one of the biggest stories, news stories in wrestling. Period.
Yep.
Hogan turning heel, and so there's Hall and Nash involved in a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's also, there was another name that you mentioned in there. Do you think HBK would have ever been considered the face of wrestling? Because I mean, he was getting pretty well known.
He was getting pretty well known, but I don't think so. Just because he didn't have that, nor I don't think he wanted to have that crossover appeal. Sean just Sean just wanted to be the best wrestler in the world. And, he wanted to go and steal the show every night. But I think that's what he was concerned with more so than being, you know, the face of all of pro wrestling. Even though talent wise, there were very few that could touch him.
Exactly. And even though Sean did pose and play girl, I just
Yeah,
wanted
he
to.
did. I mean, and that's as close really as that crossover thing as he ever got was posing and playgirl. Um, but he didn't do TV or movies or none of that. He just went out there and stole the show.
I mean, I think he was like in a movie like fairly recently, like a couple years ago, but it was
I th-
I never watched it. I don't even
I
remember the
think
name
he
of it.
was in one of the Marine movies when once the Miz kind of started doing the franchise. I think he was in one of maybe the last Marine movie, but other than that, but nothing, you know,
Yeah,
nothing
nothing
real
that
big. He
I
was
mean, I don't even
he was
remember the
like
name of it.
yeah,
So
he was like Flair. It's like Flair didn't do any of that stuff either until like way past his prime. Flair just focused on being the best wrestler in the world. But and like for again non-wrestling fans, a lot of them probably weren't familiar with Shawn Michaels, but real wrestling fans were very familiar with Shawn Michaels because his run, his first run was good. His first run was great. You know, but that second run when he came back from the broken back and wrestled another 8 years when he was told that he'd never be able to do it again. For me, that run is better than the other because you could tell Sean was in a bad place toward the end of his first run. Like last couple of years of his first run, he was in a real bad place, like physically, and he had substance abuse issues, and he was just in a really bad place. And I don't feel like he was able to enjoy what he was doing.
but at one point he was actually, and this was low key. It
Mm-hmm.
didn't really make the headlines. He was actually fired from WWF at the time for a short period because he showed up at
Oh yeah,
a show in no shape to perform. That's what they put it. He was, in other words, he was extremely high.
Yeah, him and Triple H even got into it and didn't speak for a while, quite a while, because Triple H is like, dude, you gotta go home.
Yep.
And he's like, they got into a huge fight, and he's like, you can't be here like this. You're in no shape. And this was when Sean wasn't even wrestling then. He was just an on-air personality. He was like the commissioner or something
Something, yeah.
on air. And Triple H is like, dude, you got to go. You can't do this. And he said they got into a big fight. And he said it was like a year or two that they didn't speak because Sean was so mad at him for basically kicking him out of the building.
Tell him the truth.
And yeah, and Triple H is like, I did it for his own good because he had no business being backstage in that condition, and there was no way we could let him go out in front of the camera like that.
Yep.
Which they had enough sense to do that when TNA did not have enough sense to do that with Jeff Hardy.
Oh
Uh,
Lord. There's and actually Sting. There's another one,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know. And that might have come a little bit later on,
yeah,
with Sting, but
yeah.
yeah.
With Sting kind of had that crossover thing going once he started, you know, being doing the Crow thing
Yep.
because that movie is like a cult classic, and he still does that. He still does a variation of that makeup to this day.
My kids and I watched that movie a couple weeks ago. By the way, they had never seen it, and
Ah,
I was
that
like,
movie's great.
it
Love
really
that
is.
movie.
Now, granted, my 12-year-old, there was one thing I forgot that they show in the movie because as an adult, you forget when they show boobies in a movie.
Yeah, until they pop
I
up, and then
was
it's
when you're
like,
like, whoa,
oh, I
whoa.
did that with Caden. We were watching like a Friday the 13th movie, and it was like the remake that they did. Um,
Okay.
and I forgot that the girl was topless in a scene, and we're just watching it, and okay, and then all of a sudden it's like there she is, just topless, and I'm like, oh, sorry about that, buddy, and he's like, it's okay, it's just boobs. I'm like, yeah, but I forgot they were there because, like
Yeah.
you said, as an adult, you forget. Like,
Yeah.
as a little kid, as a teenager,
You
you
remember that
see,
when you're the kid.
you especially as a teenager, you remember every bit of nudity you ever see.
Yes.
But as an adult, it's just like, well, you remember other parts of the movie besides the nudity. So
Yeah. And now, any of these older movies, now I'm trying to remember ahead of time and I'll tell my son to turn his head. Say,
yeah,
hey, Art,
yeah,
Leighton, turn away. Okay.
yeah.
And even doing that with my daughter, we watched Bram Stoker's Dracula like years ago. She still brings this up, even though, as a girl, but she still doesn't want to see that in movies. And I forgot how many times just in Bram Stoker's Dracula, you're from 1992, all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's boobs. I have no idea. They're just eating dinner and there's just boobs.
Yeah, it's
And
like, yeah, they're at the dinner table. Where are their shirts? What's going on
yeah.
here?
And before we get back to wrestling, I actually talking about Friday the 13th. I actually found this the other day, the
Oh,
first
okay,
the first 8 on Blu-ray.
okay.
And by the way, and Shawn Michaels, the movie he was in, I knew there was a movie that was a regular movie, 90 Feet from Home. And it says a troubled former Major League Baseball player returns home to confront his abusive stepfather. I have
Okay.
never watched it,
I hadn't either. I
but
didn't even. I'm a huge Shawn Michaels fan. And I had no clue he was in that one.
yeah,
So
2019. That's when it came out. So
okay, okay.
that was right before 2020, and we know 2020. The world like started reversing itself.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but um, when we talk, getting back to wrestling, when Austin he became kind of face. Now, depending, I think there was a couple of faces at the time. Hogan all of a sudden reclaimed, he's known.
Def, definitely because, and I mean, the NWO just instantly became pop culture icons. That was just, I mean, it took no time for. I mean, they hit the ground running at Bash at the Beach. The next night, and Hogan's still in the red and the yellow, and then the next night on Nitro, he comes out dressed in all black, and it was just like the world was talking because it
Yes.
was a brilliant move because they knew that the world, not just the wrestling world, but the entire world would be talking about the fact that Hogan's gone to the dark side.
Hmm.
And that was the conversation. That was, back when people used to talk about, the water cooler conversations.
Yep.
That was the conversation. Hulk Hogan went from red and yellow to all black. He went from, good guy to bad guy. And it's like face to heel, however you want to put it. But that was the conversation all over the world. Hogan with one in 24 hours reclaimed his throne as the face of wrestling.
And there may have been some other contenders, but no, he, like I said, he jumped back up, but it
Yeah.
didn't last as long. But
No, because of course, egos got in the way,
mhm,
and WCW was notorious for not realizing and protecting what they had. I mean, they could have if they could have kept the NWO small like it originally was. I didn't even have a problem when they brought in uh X-Pac or Ted DiBiase. He was the
the financial
story
backer.
storyline financial
Yeah.
backer, and then you had, because all of these guys worked for WWE, and that was the original idea, was they were invading WCW. All these former WWE guys were invading WCW and taking over. They should have kept it as that core group, but when you start having half the roster be NWO members, and you've got so many NWO members that it's split off into the Wolf Pack, the NWO Elite, and the NWO B team. It's like, what sense does it make? It's like you're just fighting against each other instead of
Uh, yeah.
following the original plan.
There's some small countries that didn't even have armies as big as what the NWO became.
Yeah, I mean, people would, the NWO would show up and there'd be three limos full of guys wearing NWO shirts, and it's like, now you've just watered it down, and now it doesn't really have any impact anymore, because when everybody's NWO, then nobody's NWO.
Exactly. And now splitting off the black and white and the black and red, that one actually they were selling both shirts and
Yeah, that one was okay, because you still had, because you
market
still
from a
had,
marketing perspective.
from a marketing perspective and even a talent perspective, because like, the Wolfpack, you know, you had Hall and Nash, you had Sting, you had Luger, you had Conan, you had Savage for a while. Um, you had like big name guys over here, but you still had, because Buff Bagwell had, he made a name for himself in the NWO. You had Scott Steiner, you had Hulk Hogan. You still had guys over here with that name value, but it's just when they started recruiting any and everybody that it just made no sense anymore. But if they could have stayed small, Hogan would have stayed the face of wrestling for a lot longer, because I think that smaller core NWO group could have kept that momentum going for years. Because that's why DX ended up doing so well, because DX got to a point where it's like, okay, this is it. You had, because originally you had Sean, Hunter, China, and Rude, and then Rude left after the Montreal Screwjob. Then, Sean left after WrestleMania 14, 13. No, WrestleMania 14.
14, yeah, after he dropped
Yeah,
the title to Austin.
yeah. So WrestleMania 14, and then Hunter took over as the leader. X Pac comes back. They add the Outlaws, and then that was it.
And they had China also.
And they had
Uh,
China,
yeah.
but China's a given because she was already an original
Yeah.
member, um, and she was with Hunter. So you had Hunter, China, um, X Pac, and the Outlaws, and then like early 2000, Stephanie was in there, but I don't ever really count her as an actual member of DX. She was just, that was Hunter's wife storyline wise. So She was just there by default. But DX was able to carry that momentum for years because they kept it small. Half the WWE roster was not DX.
And there's one name that I was going through this. It kind of occurred to me, and is really when I saw a picture. If one of the faces of wrestling wasn't even technically not even a wrestler, and that's was Vinnie Mac himself, Vince McMahon.
Yeah, yeah. Vince McMahon took Eric Bischoff's blueprint of he took the blueprint of being the evil boss, the evil corporate boss, and just turned it all the way up to 11. Because Bischoff had done, Bischoff did the evil boss thing probably year and a half before Vince did, you know, because, Eric Bischoff came out as being part of the NWO and he was the one, he was like their corporate guy that was making all these moves for them behind the scenes. But then when Vince did that promo after the Montreal Screwjob and said Brett screwed Brett,
Oh, that was it.
he was instantly the biggest heel in wrestling, instantly, and not just WWE. That was another thing everybody was talking about. It's like the owner of this company just said that he had nothing to do with what everybody just saw him have something to do with.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he went on television and basically said, "I had nothing to do with this," even though the 24 hours before that, anybody watching that pay per view or anybody watching a news clip or anything literally saw him point at the ref and tell him to ring the bell.
Yeah,
I mean, but when he said Brett screwed Brett with that, with that black eye from where Brett punched him,
yeah.
and it's just instantly he was the most hated person in pro wrestling, especially to not be a wrestler.
And it almost reminds me of like in Eddie Murphy Raw when he goes, "Hey, wasn't me."
Yeah,
But
wasn't
I
me.
look in your face.
Yeah,
Wasn't
wasn't
me.
me. I don't know what you're talking about.
There you go. Maybe it wasn't you. So, by the way, I love that one. That one's still a classic.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, when Vince McMahon, because it was a real situation
yeah.
that made him become, because before, I mean, he did that, and Vince McMahon was like, okay. A lot of people didn't even realize he was the owner. They just thought he was the annoying commentator.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. There was, and before things started clicking for me, I thought he was just the terrible commentator on the weekend wrestling shows. But yeah, but nobody knew he was the owner until it finally started coming out, and then they finally started addressing it on television that he was the owner of the company. But after that, it was like, and you could tell he was having the time of his life playing the heel. He was having a ball, and
Probably because of them the money that was coming in from all the cards, because all of a sudden the houses got a lot
yep.
bigger.
Oh yeah. Um, but yeah, he's you've had managers that have been really hated. Like Heyman's been on that list. JJ Dillon's been on that list.
Mm-hmm.
Different guys. Jim Cornette's been on that list, but they were they were hated because they were heels managing a bunch of heels. This is the owner of $1 billion company saying that someone that basically Brett screwed himself, and everybody was like, "Oh no, he didn't," and that was it. Vince was the most hated man in pro wrestling, and it worked because without Vince being the evil boss, Austin had nothing to fight against. So people wouldn't have been able to relate to Austin if he hadn't have had Vince McMahon to play off of, because everybody can relate to being upset with their boss or tired of their boss's crap or whatever.
Um, well, we already established Stone Cold at one point was kind of the face. The Rock
Mm.
definitely a face.
Yes,
Um, Cena, I'd say
for a while,
for a while, yeah.
especially sadly for Cena, especially during the lower, more boring points of wrestling, because they're the late 2000s through really late 2000s up until about 2011 when Punk beat him for the title. It was rough because I mean, indie wise, Ring of Honor was doing great. TNA slash Impact, it was doing what it could to stay relevant. I mean, they've always been a distant number two. I mean, they're not number two anymore, but when they were the only other place to go, they were like a distant number two. There was no AEW, so it was just WWE, and you could tell they just put it on cruise control and was just like, oh well, we've already we're basically the only game in town, so we're not going to have to put a lot of effort in. So, but Cena was definitely the face of wrestling for a while there. It's just wrestling wise, it was just a low point for the company.
And I think part of that scene, I mean, I will give him credit because um with his Make a Wish
Mm-hmm.
Foundation effort, because I mean he's got the record for the most
Yeah. Yeah.
appearances, and he's not stopping.
Oh no.
Because he
Nope.
doesn't do it, for publicity. He does it for, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because Cena seems like a genuine person, now some of that he's been kind of a genuine, kind of a butthole too, but with some of the other stuff in his personal life, like when you
Mm-hmm.
you find out when him and Nikki Bella broke up, that they had a relationship agreement, kind of like had a Big Bang Theory. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so he's like, according to the contract here, you got to move out of the house now.
Yeah. You gotta go. You gotta go.
And
And
a couple
you signed it.
signed
So
it, and the whole thing, like with the Nexus, that was him, and he's even admitted, yeah, I shouldn't have done that because it
yeah.
killed 6 or 7 guys' push.
Yeah. Like that.
So now some of them recovered, but
Yeah.
a couple other ones did not. But yeah,
Him
Cena. Go ahead.
him going over Bray Wyatt was another one that
Yeah,
kind of that was that really started the decline of Bray Wyatt at being taken as a serious threat or serious main eventer because you know it basically had Cena squash him in their feud.
yeah,
Bray won one match. He won the cage match. It's only because they had the creepy kid outside the ring and distracted Cena, and then Bray was able to win.
now granted, I'm not gonna lie, the creepy kids with the mask, that was actually kind of cool
Uh,
looking.
yeah, it was cool. I mean, it was a good effect, but storyline wise, it just made Bray look weak. It's like, you call yourself the eater of worlds, but then it took a child to distract Cena for you to beat him.
um Not gonna lie, if I was in the ring with somebody, especially if you didn't know what was going to happen, and I saw
Hmm.
a kid, or in some cases they had like the collection of kids,
Yeah.
I would just, all right, I'm leaving. I don't
They'll be
care.
like,
I don't care what the finish is supposed to be. I'm out. Deuces.
yeah,
I'm gone. Because that was a really good effect, and they didn't capitalize on Wyatt. And I think
yeah.
Bray Wyatt, I'm kind of hit or miss on whether or not he could have been the face. Punk, I'm still kind of, because Punk also, he was
Punk
known.
Punk was Punk was never the face of wrestling. He was the talk of wrestling for a
Yep.
while. Like
Oh, I love how you put that. That's great.
from when he did the pipe bomb, from where he did the pipe bomb on, Punk has off and on been the talk of wrestling ever since 2011. But he's never been the face of wrestling because his ego gets in his way. His
A
ego
little
and
bit.
his attitude gets in his way. And he thinks, and I'm a CM Punk fan, not so much now as I was back then, but he thinks he's a bigger deal than he is. And it's like I think he views himself on the same level as a Cena or Austin or Rock or Hogan. I think as far as wrestling goes, he views himself in the same category as those guys. And CM Punk is not as important to pro wrestling as those guys are. Without those guys, pro wrestling would not be what it is now. If you take Punk out of that equation, say Punk never wrestled, might have a tiny effect on what wrestling is just because of his style and him being a smaller guy and being able to do different things. But the overall landscape of wrestling would not be affected if CM Punk never laced up his boots.
And that was also kind of proven because he left WWE in 2014 and finally showed back up in AEW in what, 2021?
Mm-hmm.
20, yeah,
7 years.
7 years. Yep. But during those 7 years, I mean, you would have people chanting his name.
Yeah,
But
especially if you went to Chicago, you're gonna,
right.
you know, I mean, you'd instantly have people chanting his name, but not a single indie promotion or a single big league wrestling company suffered because CM Punk wasn't wrestling anywhere.
And I'll throw another name out there now. This is kind of arguable. Argue. Oh, you can argue this. I'll just here. It's too early in the morning for me to be learning how to talk right.
Yeah.
But another name that some people would definitely associate with wrestling, even though he has done some other things, and that's Lesnar.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Very true. Yeah. Lesnar could be, I wouldn't say he's the face, but
Because he
he's
keeps leaving.
definitely, yeah, he keeps, his schedule's just not consistent enough to challenge for that title, so to speak. Um, but people do know who he is outside of wrestling because of UFC.
And he actually did make it on the Vikings team. I think he made it on the practice squad for the Vikings
Practice squad.
team.
Yeah,
But I mean, which is still saying something. A lot of people will go, "Oh, you made the practice squad. Okay, what have you done?"
exactly. It's
you
it's still
know,
impressive. I mean,
yeah. Um, and what didn't he appear in one of the WWE's one of their productions like a scene like a bit part, probably someone that got killed. I thought I don't know.
maybe I'm
I
not
think
sure.
I think everybody on the roster at some point appeared in one of their productions.
Yeah,
Um, and actually, Kane, that's actually something else. You go around Knoxville, you say name a
yeah,
wrestler, they'll probably say, "Oh, Glenn Jacobs," because he's the mayor of Knox County, or they might say Bianca Belair, or
yeah,
but I knew her real name, and I don't know what her real name is on the top of my
yeah.
head. Even though I have the roster pulled up, I can actually find it. Um, but but moving on to like current times, do you think Roman is the face of wrestling right now? Because I think if I were to go, and I should have taken a survey of
Mhm.
non-wrestling fans and said name a wrestler, and and I'd have to throw other people. So I don't watch that. Um, yeah, but I bet they could still name somebody. They just don't want to admit it, and they're probably a closet wrestling fan.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
it happens.
but right now, yeah, I'd have to say Roman is the face.
And I don't. I think it'd be a good that probably would be saying Roman is the face of wrestling if there is a face of wrestling, but it
Hmm.
just doesn't seem to be as strong as well like a Hogan or an Austin or The Rock.
No, no, it doesn't. And a lot of it is like when Hogan was the face of wrestling. That was when you got the Rock and Wrestling connection.
Yeah,
That's when that really, that's right when that really popped off and started being uh getting big. And then you had with Rock and Austin, you get the Attitude Era, and then Cena comes out in the Ruthless Aggression area, gets big doing the Doctor Thugonomics stuff, and you know goes on from there. Right now, it's like plus there not weren't nearly as many wrestling companies then as there are like big wrestling companies as there are now. Like New Japan was just in Japan. There was no, they didn't come stateside. There was no crossover over here. Like New Japan has New Japan Strong in California now. So they have a U.S., they have a U.S. contingency of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Um, The indie scene is huge. If you go by the indie scene alone, Matt Cardona is the face of wrestling. If you
I
go
can
by
see
the
that.
indie
Yep.
scene, I mean, he is. I mean, he's still racking up. And here is how brilliant Matt Cardona is. They gave him crap in WWE, and he still spun that into gold during doing his original YouTube thing. That got so big that WWE basically took it from him and put it on the network, which killed it because then you had corporate hands all in it, and it wasn't just him being natural doing the thing. You had all the scripted crap that WWE loves to do. And so then, but he still got over in spite of them. So then, of course, they punished him for getting over. He ends up leaving, goes to the Indies, and starts racking up titles, you know, like he's buying action figures, which he's a huge action figure collector.
Oh, he
So it
is. That's
works.
right. I forgot about
He's a
that.
huge action figure
Yeah.
collector, and he started racking up titles. He went and won the GCW world title. He's a former NWA world heavyweight champion. Uh, I think he's still got 6 or 7 different independent championships right now. Came out over the weekend because his his wife, Chelsea Green, is one half of the women's tag team champions in WWE with Sonya Deville. So she used to come out with him on indie stuff. She used to travel with him on indie stuff. But then when she re signed to WWE, she couldn't do that anymore. He came out with 3 of his championships over the weekend for a match and was wearing his wife's tag title
Ooh. Okay. I
because
didn't. I didn't know what because I did see a lot of
yeah,
traffic on Twitter about
he
stuff. I
was
didn't know what was
he
going
was
on.
wearing his wife's tag title because he said that since they're married and she's half of the women's tag team champion, that makes him half of the women's tag team champion. So
He's a quarter
he
tag team champion.
yeah, so he wore the belt to the ring.
You know what? I like it.
I do too.
you know,
As
I,
like as far as indies go, it's Matt Cardona. I can't think of a bigger star or a hotter star on the indies than Matt Cardona. He is in demand everywhere on the indies. You know, every time I see an indie card on Twitter, Matt Cardona's name is on it because he's working. He is he is showing WWE this is what you had on your books and you just
mm-hmm.
didn't know what to do with it.
By the way, Bianca Belair, her real name is Bianca Blair Crawford because she's married to Kenny Crawford, also known as Montez Ford.
Okay, okay.
So
All right.
Bianca is her name, just
Yeah.
Bianca Blair,
And
and it
so
sounds
but
like she just took. It was probably her because it like her
yeah,
personality sounds like she's a Bianca Belair.
yeah,
I'm like, you know
uh-huh.
what?
Yep.
Once again, I
Especially
like it
especially since she started out as a heel. That sounds like something a cocky heel
exactly.
would do. But yeah, I
Um,
think if you pick it from WWE, it's Roman Reigns without question. You
yeah,
know, because even non-wrestling fans know who Roman Reigns is now.
it's gotten to that point. I mean, it
It's
really
gotten to that
has.
point, and that is credit. I don't give the company any credit with that. I give Roman Reigns, I give Joe all the credit in the world because he
Yep.
built that he took that dumpster fire of a babyface run that they gave him
Oh,
and took those ashes and rose like a phoenix and just I mean I've looked back at some promos he did during that babyface run compared to promos he does now. And it's like, I don't even know who this guy over here is because this guy was so, lame on the microphone and was not comfortable and everything. And now Roman can stand in the middle of the ring with that cocky smirk on his face, not even have the microphone yet. And people are already reacting to him. And then when he puts his hand out to Heyman to put the microphone in his hand, he's got every person in that building because they know what's coming next. He gets the microphone. he says the city's name, which gets the hometown pop. Even though he's a heel, he knows how to
And
work them.
that's like the cheap pop.
That's the cheap pop. That's the Mick Foley pop right there. That's what I like to call it. You call out the hometown. That's that cheap pop that you know you're going to get. But Roman gets the cheap pop, and then it's like, well, I'm gonna give him a little bit of a nice guy, and then I'm gonna go back to cocky heel because I'm gonna tell them to acknowledge me, and they do every time, every town.
And I think with Roman, it was also when they stopped scripting all of his promos, they
Mm-hmm.
started giving him, a little bit
Yeah,
more carte blanche. Hey, we're going to give you some leeway. You do what you want. You have the autonomy to do what
yeah,
you want on the mic. Just here's a bullet point. Please hit the bullet point,
exactly.
but
Which
figure out
is
how
how
to.
wrestling should be. Here's the
Yeah.
bullet point. Go. I mean, because those were the best promos back in the day. Like when we were growing up as kids, and you got Flair and Anderson, and you had Jerry Lawler and Jake the Snake Roberts, and you got guys
Mm-hmm.
like that on the mic. They took the bullet points and then cut a promo to
Dusty.
bring Dusty, yeah, to
Yeah.
get butts in the seats. That's how it's done. And it's like you can't script that and expect people to be like, oh, well, that's interesting. Let me buy a ticket to see that boring thing. No, not it's not going to work out. No, but you know, Roman would definitely be, if you had to pick somebody right now that I think fans, non wrestling fans, would recognize, it'd be Roman.
And I think as an up and comer, oddly enough, even though he's not a youngster, is Cody.
Oh yes, Cody is, yeah, he is at a level. He is already like, the fan interaction alone during his entrance is amazing.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it seems like every week that part gets louder every time, and it's like the fans are on their feet and ready to go as soon as the first lines of that song, when he says wrestling has more than one royal family, the fans are already coming unglued, and then that music starts and people are just like, oh my god, he's here. It's like that's the reaction, and that's the reaction you want to get. If you're really over, that's the reaction you want to get, is that the music starts and they're like, oh my god, he's here. Because that's how Seth Rollins is now.
Yeah.
His music
And
starts and people are like, okay, here we go.
if you want to see a good promo, speaking of, and this was unscripted, go watch Cody's from last night on Raw.
I've got to watch that because I saw the chatter on Twitter,
Yeah.
and I saw how people were like, that was an excellent promo.
Yeah.
And Cody he's a damn good promo. I
Yeah.
mean, you could definitely, and Dustin was a good promo
Mm-hmm.
when he wasn't shackled with having to be the American Dream 2.0.
Right.
Dustin was a great promo. You can tell that they're just that lineage is just talkers.
And
And
he's Cody's talking people into the building to watch him and Brock at SummerSlam.
uh-huh. Yep. Yeah. Cody has taken that feud. Cody's carried this feud because Lesnar, he's wrestled 2 matches. He's attacked Cody a few times, but that's it. Brock doesn't really do promo work and stuff like that. Like you said, Cody's the one that's talked people into building. Cody's the one that's talked people into buying tickets to see SummerSlam.
And SummerSlam looks like it's going to be. It actually looks like it's going to be a good card.
Yeah, it does. It looks like it's going to be an excellent card. I think the women's title match has the potential to steal the show. You've got Asuka's defending against Charlotte and Bianca in a triple threat.
Ooh.
I'm like you, and I'm not a fan of WWE's triple threat format.
But I'm a fan of all three of them.
I'm a fan of all three of them because
So
that in ring work is going to be fantastic.
yeah.
You've got Seth and Finn Balor in a rematch for the world heavyweight title.
Who's lurking in the back with the money in the bank?
Here's the thing: Finn needs to win that.
Yes.
Seth is at a point where he doesn't need the title to be over because he got over before the title was ever created.
Right.
Um, Finn needs to win that title. Then, if they want to split him off from the Judgment Day, have Damian Priest cash in on him. If they're going to have Damian Priest cash in on him, though, have him win the title. I'm tired of these failed cash ins.
Thank you.
It's
Exactly.
like you're wasting. I mean, the Money in the Bank briefcase has all this potential of creating a new top star, and then you waste it on a failed cash in for for a dusty finish. What point of the sense does that make?
I, yeah, you just wasted that. Like you
Yeah,
said, I know they were mad at Baron Corbin, so they made him that in
yeah,
that case, have him get the briefcase to somebody else.
exactly. They should have booked him in a match like they did with when they thought Mr. Kennedy was going to be out for a while. They booked him in a match with Edge, had Edge beat him for the briefcase. They did the same thing when they realized that it was stupid to put Otis as Mr. Money in the Bank to begin
Right.
with because you were never going to push him as a main event guy. They booked him in a match with The Miz, had The Miz beat him for the briefcase. Just do that. If you got to punish somebody, at least keep the briefcase viable for somebody else, not just waste it. And stop putting main eventers who don't need it in there. Like when Cena won Money in the Bank. John Cena has never needed Money in the Bank ever. Not since John Cena has not needed any sort of extra prop to push him to the top since he beat the Big Show for the U.S. title at WrestleMania 20. You knew right then that was that was a future world champion main event guy. That's the guy they were going to strap the rocket to. You knew it then. And him winning Money in the Bank, one took a spot from somebody else who needed that spot because Cena didn't need that spot. And then they just have him fail in the cash in. He cashed it in against Punk and
Huge waste.
yeah, and just wasted it. And he announced a week beforehand when he was going to cash it in. No,
Which
people,
defeats the purpose of Money in the Bank.
it's supposed to be a surprise. You catch the champion at their weakest and cash it in.
My idea for a Money in the Bank, just my idea. You still give them a title match with regardless of it being Money in the Bank. You have them, of course, not win the title, but have them lose by disqualification because they started smacking somebody upside in the WWE, the back with a chair.
Yeah.
You beat them down. Oh, I just got disqualified. Oh, here's my briefcase. I'm cashing in now.
There you go.
Count the
Yep.
pin.
Yep.
Uh, but
it's kind of like in an Iron Man match where you sacrifice, you sacrifice a disqualification just to beat down your opponent so you can turn around and pin them and get that win back.
I accidentally did that in one of the 2K games, but I was like, you know what? That's a good idea. Hey, somebody in the chair got disqualified like 3 times, but then I ended
Yeah.
up winning like 4 falls. That was a long time ago now. It feels like, but one thing about because when you mentioned Charlotte, her real name is Ashley.
Yeah.
Dana Brooke, her real name, Ashley Sabera. And what was the last one? In let's see, Shotzi, her real name, Ashley Urbanski. What don't they like about the name Ashley? I just want
I don't
to.
know. That apparently they're not a fan of,
Yeah,
of that
they don't
name.
like the name Ashley.
As there's
You know,
only um, Ashley Mazzaro was the only one that actually used the name Ashley because that was her real name.
oh, I was going to say, was that even her real name though?
Yes, that was her real name. Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, they just don't like the name Ashley. And then some of the other names on here, I noticed it's kind of off topic a little bit. Some of the other names on here, I was like, oh, I didn't know that was their actual real name. Because we know Cena, Cena uses his own name.
Yeah. Orton uses his.
Yep. Of course, Ronda Rousey. I mean, you can't get away from that one.
Shayna Baszler uses hers.
Yeah, that one. Actually, you know what? Now it shouldn't surprise me because she was also
Yeah.
in MMA fighter, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Uh, Chelsea Green, but her real name is Chelsea Gardona.
Yeah.
Candice LeRae, Candice Gargano.
Yeah.
Um, but then some of these other ones, I know Matt Riddle is
Like,
actually Matt Riddle.
yeah. Well, like Becky Lynch, her first name is Rebecca, but her last name is, well, it's,
I just saw it. Quinn.
yeah, Rebecca Quinn
Actually, I don't know if she took his name or
or
not, but
whatever.
Lopez.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and let's see. Damian Priest, his real name Luis Martinez.
Mhm.
Okay, Damian Priest is a cool sounding name. Don't get me wrong, but Luis Martinez is also kind of. That's in one case. Is like, why don't you just get with their name?
Well, his name on the Independents, and when he was in Ring of Honor, it was Punishment Martinez.
See, and that sounds like
Hmm.
he should have his own shirt, kind of like the one you have on
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
Let me see. Of course, Dominic. His real first name is Dominic.
Yeah.
Um, Gutierrez. Drew McIntyre, Andrew Galloway the fourth. See, Andrew Galloway. That sounds
Yeah.
like he could be a pretentious. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
but okay, Finn Balor. His name is Fergal Devitt.
Devitt Prince. Yeah. He went by Prince Devitt in New
Ah,
Japan.
okay, there we go. Gunther. What do you think his real first name is?
I don't
Walter.
know. Here's the
Walter.
thing.
Walter
He got
Hahn.
he got over all over the world as Walter. I don't know. I do know why, because of course, WWE is
Trademark.
like, ooh, let me trademark that. And he's probably like, no, you're not trademarking my name. No, because if I ever leave here, I can go back anywhere else and instantly be Walter, and everybody's
Mm-hmm.
still gonna know who I am.
Umberto Carrillo. His real name is Umberto Garza Carrillo.
Yeah, him and Angel Garza are cousins.
Okay, I did see that. I saw the Garza and Angel. Yeah, Angel Garza, Umberto Garza Solano. So they're both Umberto Galazzo.
Hmm.
Wow. Or no, I'm sorry. Umberto Carrillo is Umberto Garza with an
Hmm.
A on the end instead of the O. Oh no, they both have an
Gotcha.
A. Umberto Garza. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Wow. Um. Yeah, I've just totally lost my train of thought. Akira Tozawa is Akira Tozawa, but anyway, I just figured I just noticed that about the Ashleys. When I was
Yeah.
going through this the list, thinking who else could be the face. Sammy's over, extremely over, but you know people still don't know
Sammy's
who it.
Sammy's extremely over, but I think it's starting to wane a little bit because they didn't keep him in the main event scene. They put him in the tag title scene, which kind of sucks now because Kevin Owens has got a legitimate injury right now.
Okay, that explains why he's not been doing a lot.
Yep, he's dealing with a legit injury, and that's why he hasn't been wrestling. And he's stayed on TV and stuff, but he hasn't been wrestling. So um, kind of leaves Sammy. Sammy's doing single stuff, like he wrestled Dominic for the North American title last night. But Sammy should have stayed. They should have kept Sammy in the main event scene. He got there, he got over, he got to the main event scene. That's where he still should be.
I don't think they could have kept the intensity up though, because I mean, think about how just man
Once the
that
once
level. Whew,
Yeah, once he left the bloodline and once the feud with Roman was over, though, yeah, there was. I still think he should have been a main event guy. Maybe not even on SmackDown, but he could be in the main event scene on Raw, for the world heavyweight title. But I just think they kind of missed the boat on Sammy. I think in a way they capitalized on it, in a way they didn't.
but just going through all the names, I really can't think of anybody else besides Roman. Seth, no. I mean, he's huge,
I mean, he's
but
over, but he's over. He's over in that WWE bubble. He's not over
yeah,
outside of that. But Roman's kind of transcended that WWE bubble.
yes. And as far as like honorable mentions, even some who are retired, Undertaker still comes up.
Oh yeah,
Triple
yeah,
H, a lot of people go, oh yeah, Triple H, because I mean he's an executive, so I mean, and he's part of the royal family of wrestling, the
Yep.
McMahons. He
Hmm.
married into it, um, but he married into the family. But Triple H was a wrestler first, and he thinks from a wrestler's point of
Yeah.
view.
And yeah, true. He married into the family, but if I had to put up with the McMahons on a daily basis, uh, I'd want a little credit too. I mean,
Yeah. Um,
and probably some medication.
I mean, you know what? He cut his hair, wears a suit every day. I'm like, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm doing none of the above.
Yeah.
So, um, you know, the Miz, I think, is a good rep of wrestling. I don't think he's the
Yes.
face because Miz he did so many other projects outside of wrestling before he became a
Yeah,
wrestler.
I agree. Yeah, he's a excellent representative, excellent ambassador for the company, but not the face.
Right, not the face. Okay, I just saw Ricochet. His real name is Trevor Mann. I'm like, yeah, Ricochet sounds a lot more intimidating than Trevor.
Yeah, he's from
Um,
Paducah.
yep, he's from Paducah. Those of you who don't know, because he was a good friend of um Jake
Jake
Petway,
Petway.
who
Yep.
we had on the show, who was also
Yep.
a friend of Dwaylen's, and now he's a friend of mine. I was like, hey, Dwaylen, I met a new friend. So, um, and by the way, Jake Petway, he makes guitars.
He does. And I actually ran into him at Sam's Club a few weeks ago, and he said that him and Elias have been talking about doing him making some guitars for him when he comes back on television.
Oh, there you go, because he actually did have a guitar for
Hmm.
Elias. Um, yeah. So outside of those names, Roman, what I have to say right now is not just because he's the undisputed champion with 3 belts for some reason, but because I mean he has really been carrying the company. He's put it on his
Literally.
back. Yeah, and
I mean, since 2020. I mean, he carried that company through the pandemic, just like John Moxley carried AEW through the pandemic. Roman Reigns literally carried WWE on his back through the pandemic. He became the most interesting thing on WWE television. He was the only thing I could watch without being distracted by the giant screens behind. He like his stuff was so interesting that I forgot that there were no fans there because of what he was doing.
I was on those screens a couple of times. I saw myself. It was actually kind of neat. It was disappointing when when you realize what was going on. You're hearing them in your ear telling you when to cheer and
Yeah,
boo.
yeah.
But it was kind of cool, when all of a sudden my wife looked, you said, "Oh, there you are, right there." And
There you
so I
go.
had to, yeah, I had to, it was on DVR, so I had to rewind it, and
Yeah.
I got a picture of it. Uh, but anyway, so I don't have anything else to add.
No.
If anybody, give us any feedback on this, because I know this may be a subject that somebody listens to go, no, no, Noah Gabriel, he's the face of wrestling. Because if you're listening, I hope to see you this Friday in Mount Orb. So, um, yeah, Noah's a good dude. I just want to let everybody know that.
Oh
Um,
yeah, he's a good guy, but
yeah,
I still stand by the fact loving the heel work.
yeah. Noah's doing good. Glad to see that. And also, give us feedback on who you think the face is, who you think the faces were, and also give us feedback. Let us know. Honestly, this is a kind of a technical feedback. Let us know how we sound, because I just got a new mic recently. I'm still trying it out. And also, if you're on YouTube, let us know the quality of the video, because I don't know if you noticed, but it may look a little different. I got a new camera.
Yeah, I can tell. Yeah.
Yep, it's all HD and stuff. So, um, and I also got a sound card I was trying to hook up, and I never could get it hooked up yesterday, so I could have sound effects. But
Hmm.
but maybe one day. So,
Yeah.
but hopefully, we'll figure out our schedule, and we apologize for anybody who was waiting for us to have a show already on a Tuesday morning, and well, we're just not recording it on Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
So until we can
Yeah.
figure out,
I want to apologize myself. Just I've had life has just been extremely hectic, and our food truck has really taken off, so we've been extremely busy with it. And then I've also got a small mowing business that I started up back in April that's kind of taken off too. So it's just been barely have enough time to breathe, much less
and
anything else.
and just make sure you drink plenty of water whenever you're out mowing again, because we don't want you to get heat
Yeah,
exhaustion.
yeah. No, don't want to do that again. God no.
Yeah.
That was
Um,
awful.
but until we can talk again, my friend, I'm just going to say good day and
Good
God
day.
bless.
God bless.